In this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we'll talk about how do you have a conversation with a peer when you don't agree. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hey there, welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson.
I'm Michelle Hill.
And we're excited to be talking about conflict. Is that really a thing?
We're excited about talking about conflict.
Oh,
yes,
so
we're so excited.
So one of our last episodes was about when you're the leader, how do you help employees work through conflict? And this episode, we decided to take a little bit different spin on conflict because it's probably one of our, not maybe our top topics that people ask us about, but it's often
pretty high.
It's pretty high, right? And so this is the topic of how do peers work through conflict on their own. So if I have an issue with someone, how do I approach that person and not be a jerk about it? And so I was telling Michelle before we started, I was like, I struggle with this. I mean, I have to work hard at if I know I'm going to be talking to someone about something that might be uncomfortable. I'm trying not to call it conflict because, like, I don't know that there's going to be conflict. I'm projecting that it's going to be conflict, but it's uncomfortable for me because I don't want it to be uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, it's your fears, right?
It's my fears.
It's those fears, those underlying fears, and we all have different fears.
Mm-hmm.
So we both may, I don't want to say use the word struggle necessarily, but just not. It's. I don't think anyone truly wakes up. Well, again, not most anyone. We will have a 6% of the population maybe wake up and say, "How could I have conflict today?
Right.
I can't wait to get in the office and have a conversation with Andrea because we disagree on this." Right. I don't think that necessarily happens, but I think we all have those different underlying fears that either prevent us or impact us in a negative way on how we do it. And I think having those types of conversations, it's a skill. And so just like any sport, we need to get better at it. We need to get some different framework, that we can utilize. We need to practice. We need to get feedback. We need to practice more and to get better at it.
Right.
And that's just everyone.
And I want to be clear, this isn't the conversation about how do we disagree on something. That's another kind of conflict, because if we're in a meeting and you and I disagree on something, we can be okay having that conflict. I don't agree with that, or I have another perspective on that. People need to learn how to do that, but
definitely.
This is the situation where unmet expectation or a pattern of behaviors that isn't working or something like that, where it's like Michelle's got to come to Andrea and say, "Yo, Andrea, this isn't going to work, and this isn't going to work, and it's uncomfortable." So, either what do you do, or what do you advise people to do when they have to? Somebody comes to you, it's like, "How do I have this conversation with Andrea? Because I don't know how to start. I don't even know where to go. I don't know where to start with this."
Well, I think there's, and I just said this earlier in another podcast, just like a two-prong approach, but I believe it's really helpful to understand or have the conversation with someone when it's not when we disagree, but when we have to have a difficult conversation, or we get to have a difficult conversation, what do you need from me? Like, what's the best approach? Sometimes you can, if we can talk about that a little bit, because if we just simply go into the DISC assessment, you're going to have some people that are like, if I'm making you mad or upsetting you or not meeting your expectations, just freaking tell me. Tell me now. Do not wait, right? And then you're going to have some people that are, I need to be prepared. And so being prepared is just, I need to be mentally prepared. So don't catch me off guard. Schedule time with me. Or say, hey, I need to talk to you about X, whatever X is, and when would it be good for us to have that conversation, right? Which I know you and I have talked about this, where if someone schedules time on your calendar, if one of us in the office schedule time on your calendar, and it's just time on your calendar, but for whatever reason, you might look at it and go, "Oh my God, what are they going to talk to me about?"
What is this about? He doesn't tell me what I'm...
You start just rippling down that negative, spiral of negative, and it's like, nothing. Hey,
it's all good.
I had some ideas.
Right, that's good.
But I think there's a a huge opportunity that we miss just to have that conversation. But then I think the approach is getting permission when you approach them. But there's also that, and I mentioned to you earlier before we started, it's that bit of being vulnerable. But it's like I need to talk to you about something that we need to talk about, and it's not going to be perfect. You know, I might say some things wrong, and I might need to correct myself.
Right.
But if we don't have this conversation, because it's not perfect in my mind, it's going to be worse off versus just let's do it and can we work through it? Because there's some things I'm going to say that, you know, it makes me uncomfortable, at least for whatever reason. And I want us to talk about it so we can get a better mutual understanding or get on the same page, whatever that is, right?
And I think that we sometimes blow up stories in our head and just make this, we go through this scenario, well, if I say this, he or she's going to do that, and this is what's going to happen, and then they're going to fight with me, or they're going to, like, you're not my boss, or whatever the thing is that's going to happen. I was like, wait a second. We're talking about something that hasn't even happened. We're worried about something that hasn't happened yet. Okay?
Yes.
So, you know, saying something is like, I need your help with something, and I believe your intentions are good, right? We don't have to say those words, but something like that. But I really do need your help, and I feel as though I'm doing something wrong, or I've offended you, or I don't know if I'm misunderstanding something. You know, so
using some I statements.
Some I statements that we've all heard about. That I'm frustrated, I'm concerned, I'm worried, I'm losing sleep, I'm whatever it is I'm doing, you know, say that up front. And I'm concerned, or I'm afraid of how I'm going to come across as I say this. So let me just say it, knowing that my intentions are, we're going to be fine when we have this conversation. But here's my problem, or here's my issue. Help me understand. And a lot of times people, you know, it could be like, if I make up this story, hey, Michelle, I don't understand why you're always, or why I see that the report always comes in on Monday when I need them on Friday. I was like, whatever this is, like, and the reason I need them on Friday is because I work on them over the weekend, but you don't get them to me, so now I'm behind.
Well, I didn't know that.
And she didn't know this. Right? Like,
I don't know. Communicate.
Right? You know, it's like sometimes for some people that's a difficult conversation.
Yes, right? That definitely can be.
Right? Or it could be a thing where I notice in meetings that when I start talking, your thought comes out halfway through my thought, and you interrupt me, and I'm making this up stuff. Okay, so but in reality,
I will try to do that on Friday.
Right. So, but a lot of times, what we're bringing up as an issue is a complete misunderstanding or a lack of information. I mean, 80% plus.
Yes, and I think if a person's not meeting your expectations, there's some ownership that can go both directions here too, right?
Right.
How good of a job did I do at helping them understand those expectations and provide them training and feedback so they were demonstrating the right expectations? And then now if they're not doing it, it's not because I know they don't know how, they've demonstrated it, right? But now they're choosing not to. That's the conversation. But if I've never truly seen them actually do a great job at it, why would I expect that they were able to do a great job at it, right?
Because I told them.
Yeah, I told them once.
Right.
And I think the other thing too, one little sidebar here on having the conversations is oftentimes if you and I have had one difficult conversation, quote unquote, in our minds, right? We can't assume how each of us responded is how we're going to respond during the next one either, right? Because everything is unique to itself, and we all have different needs, and depending on how we're feeling at the moment. I mean, so many balls we're juggling with those emotions and everything that I may respond one way. I mean, we're not going to be hardcore left or right, but I may respond one way, but then, you know, where I'm more nonchalant, but I may respond to something completely different, a little more passionate. And that shouldn't catch you off guard either, because it's all relevant on my stories and my understanding, how I'm feeling. I mean, so many things that are happening.
But if it happened where one time it was emotional, it triggered you, right? Now that's in my long-term memory, and that's going to stay there.
Yes.
And so we have to manage the fact that is this always the way? Or am I
Yes.
projecting this is always the way?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
It's a narrative.
changing the approach can help. Just giving them a heads up, not surprising a person with, hey, you and I need to have a conversation. By the way, don't say that. But it's like, hey, I need your help with something. Do you have some time? In fact, just yesterday I had a conversation with you. It's like, hey, I'm in a dilemma and I need your help with something. And it kind of went off in different splinters, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was disagreeing with you on, but the conversation went
yes.
into a disagreement or a
Different perspective.
different perspectives on
Yeah.
something. We can disagree on something. Like I said, that's a different conversation. But even just opening up, it's like, I have a dilemma or I have an issue and I need your help with it. People love to help other people.
Correct. Yeah. Ask for help. I
And-
say that all the time. Just ask for freaking help because most people want to help you.
Yeah. So let's
Yep.
reel this
Pull it
back
back
in.
together.
Okay. So I've often given this advice. So when a person has to have a conversation with someone else and they're worried about the reaction, the first thing I ask them to do is, one, do you believe that the other person's intentions are good or bad? Because that will change their person's mind right away. Most people are not waking up to screw up, and they're not just waking up to piss somebody off.
Yes.
So we recognize that. Second is letting them know they're going to need to have the conversation. And so do they know how to open up the conversation?
The opening's huge too.
And most people are like, I could use some help there.
Well, and I think the opening is so critical because it's going to either take that person down a path of threat or maybe I'm okay.
Right.
Let's talk, right?
Right.
So
And decide whether you want to set up a time formally or do you just want to drop by? Because drop-bys actually aren't that bad. So someone could just approach us like, hey, I need your help with something. And that person may have the time right there. But most people will look up and say, okay, right? It's like, I have this question and I need your help. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about that now? Or would you need to finish whatever
still
you're
give
doing?
a choice.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
They still need to have a choice.
But
Yeah.
the drop-by doesn't scare people without saying, here's my meeting invitation. It's like, what's this for?
Yeah,
Right?
unless they've told you that they
Right.
want that,
Yes.
because not everyone's going to necessarily want that, but some people it's like that could be a deal breaker for them.
Right. So recognize the intention behind that other person's behavior. To recognize you're going to have that conversation. So how are you going to open up the conversation? I need your help with something. Hey, I've got a couple things I want to run by you. And that's a legitimate question or statement by saying, I've got a couple things I want to run by you, includes, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? Right?
Yep.
Those are the kinds of things that when people are there, it's like, this is just a conversation. And I think that we build up these conversations that we think are going to be difficult because we don't make them a conversation. We make them a battle.
Yeah. Well, and if we avoid, then the stories, we're basing a lot of our belief system that we're building off assumptions, not facts, and we just make it way bigger than it needs to be.
Right.
And then if we avoid it, then we're like, oh God, this happened.
Right.
This has been going on for 6 months and I still haven't said anything.
Make sure that the conversation starts off with some kind of an I statement, such as, I need your help, I need to run a couple things by you, things like that. Make sure that what you're doing is not being incredibly accusatory.
Yes.
Right? Looking at how can you phrase this where the person's intentions are probably good, there's just a misunderstanding, or there needs to be clarity. And if you go into the conversation like that, literally in all the decades I've been doing this kind of coaching, I have never had anybody come back and say, well, that sucked. You know,
Maybe, but it was hard. But
it was hard.
More often than not, well, that was a little better than I thought it was going to be, or not
didn't
as
I-
hard, or
Why didn't I say this earlier?
yes,
Is oftentimes what we get because people don't know how to have this conversation. And so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this,
but it's a big one.
It's a big issue because oftentimes we'll get employees who will come to us and say, so-and-so's not doing whatever it is I expected.
Yes.
And the manager does exactly what they're not supposed to do and says, okay, I'll take care of it. I'm like, stop doing that, leader. Stop that. If I could get anybody to stop doing one thing, it would be stop taking on someone else's problem.
Stop fixing
It's
their
not
problem.
yours.
Yes.
Okay? Your job is to make sure the problem gets solved, not always to solve the problem.
Yes.
So, what have you done? What steps have you taken so far? How can you start this conversation? What do you believe about this person? Do you know how to start this conversation? How would you start this conversation? Right?
Yeah.
That's the conversation from the leader.
Yes.
And so just recognize first, if you are the leader, teach your folks how to have difficult conversations or the conversations where they feel uncomfortable. If you're the person that needs to have that difficult conversation or that uncomfortable conversation, recognize it's a conversation. It doesn't have to be power against power.
Correct.
It's asking for help and making sure that people understand that we're in this together. We might disagree, but let's see if we can clear up the misunderstanding of whatever it is that's going on between us. So if you missed the episode that we talked about what leaders need to do if they have people who are disagreeing, you can check out that episode. That's the previous episodes. But thanks for joining us for this episode about if you're the person who needs to have a conversation with someone else, how do you do that? Thanks for listening in on this episode, and please subscribe so you never miss another episode.